the Dream 100 Show. The epicenter of influence, collaboration, and exponential growth. You're about to discover the power of relationships. Dream 100 relationships. And you're one relationship away from a totally different business and life. This is your host, Michael Tesner.
Hey there, and welcome to episode 10 of the Dream 100 Show. So over the last couple of weeks, I've been getting a lot of questions around the teachings, and in many of the episodes, I've tried to answer some of those questions during the episode, but what I've found is that there are a couple of themes that have boiled up to the top where there's been a lot of variations of questions. So in today's episode, I want to kind of go through some of those questions and just add a little bit more context, clarity, ideas, and asterisks, so to speak, so that you know there are always exceptions to some of these different rules. So I'm going to jump around a little bit all over the place by way of just kind of keeping you on your toes and keeping me on my toes as well. So the big question that I get asked and have gotten asked many, many times is around the gift, when you get to that gifting strategy, and the amount of money. Is it $20, $100, $200? How do you decide? And when's too much, not enough, and just all those different variations around, Michael, what should I invest by way of the gifts? And I did talk a lot about this during the episode when we were going through gifts and how to pick amounts and things like that, but I still got some additional questions. So to me, that means that I didn't clarify it enough. Now, with everything, there's often an asterisk, and the big asterisk with this one is that it's largely going to depend on the audience that you're going after. So if you keep in mind that some audiences are used to really extravagant things, so like if you were marketing to, on your Dream 100, attorneys, doctors, those kinds of like high-level professionals, they're going to be used to things that are a little bit higher end. Now, that doesn't mean, though, that if you're going after, let's say, somebody in the home services space, any of those niches, that they don't like nice things. That's not what I'm saying. But there's a certain level of expectation with some of the different things. So that's the first piece to this, is that it's really going to vary based on the audience you're going after. Now, the second thing, again, is that I really want you to reverse engineer how much these potential relationships are worth to you. And one of the things that I don't want you to do is underinvest in this strategy. So let's just say you go full guns blazing for 6 months, you deploy this strategy as I've taught you, and you don't start to see results. After 6 months, and we're going to talk through a little bit more on the results side, you definitely should be getting some results. So I always like to then start looking into things. Show me the copy that you were sending out. Show me how you were tracking that you were hitting those daily singles and getting out the messages to people. Show me the gifts. How many gifts have you sent in? What frequency? What were they? How much were they? And often when I look at it, the amount of those first gifts is just so low that it falls into the category of noise. We're trying to get you to stand out. And if you tell me, Michael, one of these relationships is worth $100,000, for example, I could argue that over a 12-month or 6-month period, on the low side, you should be willing to invest $10,000, $20,000, even $30,000 or more. As many marketing people have said well before my time, those that can afford to invest and spend the most to acquire a customer win. That still holds true here. If you go so low and then your gift again falls into that noise category, you go with the whole $5 or $10 Starbucks gift card because you're worried about the budget side of things, those, it may get noticed, but it's not going to solicit a Dream 100 type of response. So the range that I like to say is traditionally for gift number one, no less than $30, and typically I'll go as high as $100 on gift number one, but usually you're in that $30 to $50 range. And if it's that other audience that I talked about that is kind of expecting or always expects kind of higher end things, you might have to push the envelope a little bit. And you might have to be at that $100 gift mark or the $80 gift mark. But keep in mind that this is going to be the first gift of several. So you don't need to come right out of the gate swinging and go throw $500 gifts at each person because you want to rapidly get noticed. Will a $500 gift get noticed? 100%. But as I've talked to you over the last several weeks, this is about hitting singles. It's about building on each day. It's about building some rapport so that they have seen a lot of your content that you've been posting on their social media. You have to have a little bit of that relationship before you're going to jump and send that big of a gift. So a lot of people said, how much is too much? How much is not enough? The range that I would suggest you look at is $30 to $50 for gift number one. And then after they've been a guest on your podcast, for example, that typically for me is a $100 plus gift. And then from there, it really varies based on the people you're going after and how much that relationship is worth. I traditionally will cap out around $500 for one of my particular Dream 100 prospects. If I'm not getting any kind of replies, like I won't just continue to send gifts and just I'm going to send a $300 pen and I'm going to continue to send gifts. I might scale the gifts back then and I'll continue the social media side of things. But if I'm not getting any responses, I'm not getting any thank yous, I'm not getting any love and attention, I definitely start to scale that stuff back. So unfortunately, my long-winded answer that I just gave you is a lot of it really, it depends. But don't go anything less than $20, $25. I would prefer to see you at $30. And then as the relationship continues to grow, that's when you can send, the $100 gift card, for example, to a restaurant that they just went to a couple of weeks ago. If you remember, we talked about not making it too stalkerish where you're literally sending them a gift certificate to a restaurant they went to 2 days ago. So that's kind of the range that I suggest. But you have to kind of use your discretion based on your audience. The next question that I got was around how do you pick of the three types of Dream 100 audiences? So the joint venture / partnership, so people that have your audience on their mailing list or at their store, your Dream 100 prospects, and then your Dream 100 media. How do you pick which of those to start with? And a lot of people have continued to ask, can I go after all three? Which I talked about previously, and one of the biggest mistakes people are making. For me, the one that I always recommend to everyone to start with is going after the joint venture relationships. You don't have to knock it out of the park to where you're landing one of those Dream 100 prospects right out of the gate. I would be much more interested if you were able to get a trickle of customers on a regular basis. So if you know that one of these partners has the ability to refer 50 people, 20, 100, whatever that magical number is to your business, I'm very, very intrigued on that because you're not going to get hit with this huge influx where your product or service may be tested a bit. And what I mean by tested is that you might hit a wall or capacity wall where all of a sudden that partner is referring a bunch of business to you, you're not able to fulfill it, they start complaining to the partner, and then you end up blowing that relationship. I want to rather see a trickle of some new customers where you're able to start to fulfill, you build some goodwill, and then you continue to develop that relationship with that particular partner. So the audience that I always say to go after first is looking for people that have your ideal customers. They don't have to be your Dream 100 customers, but they have your customers already on their list, frequenting their store, visiting their website, across their social media, where they can start to promote you. You can build some fun joint venture stuff together and then start to move the needle. That is the audience that I always recommend. So a lot of people said, well, why wouldn't you start with press to build some more press before you go after the joint venture partners? You definitely can. But for me, one of my love languages is money. And press is definitely going to help you from a brand standpoint. It's going to help you in the grand scheme of things. But I know that these relationships do take some time to transpire. So I would much rather see you going after those partners. If you have the bandwidth, go after some of the press at the same time. But the joint ventures is where 9 times out of 10 I'm always going to recommend, unless there's very, very few people that have the audience that you're looking for on their database. But those are really few and far in between. Like I can think of really obscure businesses or niches, for example, like, well, Michael, no one's going to have my customers on their list. Well, you look at where else do your customers shop. Doesn't have to be exactly related to what you do, but they're shopping at certain places. They're going to a certain restaurant. Like there's a lot of other things where they could be visiting or checking out a website, for example. So that's the answer to that one. The next one that I've got is around business social media links versus personal social media links. Like, Michael, a lot of people were asking, like, why would you go after personal? Other people were asking me the exact opposite of why would you comment on business if you're really going after the individual that works at or owns the business? Why would you go after both? So there are a lot of variations of questions around there. So either I didn't do a great job explaining it or there's just a lot of questions. But it doesn't matter. We're going to go through that one right now. So when you're building out your Dream 100 list, so let's say you were going with the joint venture partners and you start to build that out, I need you to know anything and everything about them. And the chances are pretty high that they own some type of business. A lot of entrepreneurs and business owners, their identity is their business. Now, a lot of them, it's the other way around. They'll kind of have their identity more as the family and their kids and things like that. And then the business is still there. But regardless, they're still spending a fair amount of time at their business and then a fair amount of time at home. So when I'm building out that profile, I need to know anything and everything about that particular prospect. I want to know, again, where they're hanging out. I want to know all the different relationships that they have. I want to know where they're visiting. I need it all. And from a standpoint of hitting them up on their personal versus their business, the reason that I want you to do both is that it allows you to spread out your efforts so that it doesn't start to seem like you're borderline stalkerish. Now, here's an example of where that could start to bite you in the butt. If your prospect only has, let's say, a Facebook page and it's closed, so you have to send them a friend request, you really can't see much. You can comment on some stuff, but very, very little they post publicly. And that's their only social media that they personally have, but their business has LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. So their business has a bunch. If you were to only be commenting on their personal Facebook and it's a closed Facebook, so the comments are really only going to be around when they're updating their profile picture, for example, or something that they might have shared where they change the settings to public, you're going to run out of stuff to post very, very quickly. And if you're commenting on the same stuff, it's going to seem very, very stalkerish. So I want you to spread out those efforts. But really the bigger reason for all of this is that this is about visibility. And I don't know if the person that's managing their social media, maybe they're going to have some more pull in the organization. And then they're going to nudge the boss or the owner and say, hey, this person's commenting a lot on our stuff. Do you know this person? And they might say, well, yeah, I've seen some of their posts on my social media. It's all about spreading out the visibility and then continuing to hit those daily singles so that it's great. The business Facebook page, for example, then their personal Facebook page, their LinkedIn, and you can play with what day is what, but it's giving you a lot more exposure. And also keeping in mind that some of these people don't even leverage social media at all. So you're going to be commenting and the chances are low that they're going to respond. But that's when someone at their office notices things and they bring it to you, and that kind of pops up, and all of a sudden your name is getting mentioned, and that relationship could potentially move. Yeah, I think I've seen that person commenting on my stuff, but I really don't look that often. And that's how that relationship can start to move. And when that's coupled then with all the offline stuff, it really starts to just move that needle and just have you really be omnipresent. So I'm hoping that answers that question. Next question is around text message marketing and how often can you do it? Why don't you like to do it sometimes? All that stuff. So the big thing with text right now, especially in the United States, is that there are a ton of rules for sending text messages to people that have not opted in. Like there's going to start to be a really big crackdown. So it's very, very gray and borderline illegal for you to find their cell phone number and then send them a message. The way that you get around this is that they respond to you with a cell phone number via social media, for example. They come on as a guest on your podcast, one of those things, and you say, hey, would it be okay if I were to send you some text messages from time to time? I promise I'm not going to spam you. And once they give you that consent, you're golden, and then you can start to text. But I would be very, very cautious to just scrape a bunch of cell phone numbers of your Dream 100 and send out a broadcast, even if you're doing it one by one. It's one of those where if you haven't given them your cell phone number, I have seen that burn a lot of bridges very, very quickly. And again, the FTC is really starting to crack down on that type of marketing as well. The next question, or set of questions rather, was around the podcast. And some of you asked, is this your favorite strategy to speed up the Dream 100 process? And then others asked the exact opposite of, is this really necessary? So I'm going to give you a few different answers. The first one, I'm going to answer the second question, is the podcast necessary? So the short answer to, is the podcast necessary, is no. It's not 100% you have to be deploying a podcast. You have to be inviting people. It's not the only strategy to get people to end up converting to a Dream 100 relationship. With that said, in all of the Dream 100 done for you that I do, and all the Dream 100 stuff that I'm doing personally, we leverage the podcast. And the reason is that it gives me another angle to do some outreach. So as you're commenting on someone's social media and you're responding to some of the different things that they have out there, okay, fine. You're sending some articles, you drop some gifts. Hey, I found this was helpful to you. You're going to eventually start to run out of stuff to talk about. Now, the good news is there's always something that's new. There's always something that's in their market that you can send. Again, whether it's a video, an article, something, a new book you thought they would like, there's always ways to continue the relationship and really to kind of continue to nudge them. But if you think about the frame that you put yourself in of, I would love to interview you as a guest on my podcast, you're giving to them. Again, that's the law of reciprocity. But it starts the relationship on a warmer front, and then it gives you a reason after the podcast to really follow up a lot more aggressively. So you're able to say, hey, podcast is coming out, just wanted to let you know, here's the date. Maybe a couple days later, here's a link, you can go take a look. A few days later, we sent it to our email database, wanted to send you some more traction. Here's a copy of that email. Week later, you send the gift. You can call or text, hey, just want to make sure you got the gift. It gives you reasons to continue to kind of ping them. And then even after the fact, if it didn't transpire into something rapidly, it gives you some other reasons. Hey, your episode has already gotten 900 listens, for example. Like it just gives you those little ways that you can kind of quick nudge where it's not the same kind of stuff over and over. So if you were saying, Michael, should I do the podcast 100%? Doesn't have to be overly fancy. I mean, again, you can launch this with a $100 webcam and a Blue Yeti microphone, for example. So under $200, tons of different software tools. You can even use Zoom. There's a lot of ways to do it. And I always want you to do video. I want you to connect with them via video. There's just a lot of other things that you can do with it and kind of splice it, dice it, etc. So is it 100% necessary? No. Would I highly recommend you do it? 100%. The last question that I got asked, it was asked by probably a factor of 10 compared to everything else, was around expectations. When do I fold them? How long does this take? How long should it take? When do I give up? When do I not move out? Like, there's all those variations. With everything, this depends. Depends on the audience. It depends on how much money you're investing. But if you're starting to hit those singles day after day after day, if you're deploying the strategy as I've taught you over the last 10 weeks of episodes, and you're continuing to do it, within the first 90 days, you're going to start to get some positive replies. You're going to start to get some people that say yes to a meeting, yes to a podcast. They're going to reply to some of your comments. Thanks for showing me all this love. Thank you for the helpful article. Got your email. I'm a little swamped right now. Follow up with me in the next quarter. You'll start to get some of those in the first 90 days. You might even get some in the first couple of weeks. If your audience is a lot harder to break through, it's going to take a little bit longer. It might take 2 or 3 gifts, for example. It might take some really creative outreach. But if you're continuing to be persistent, if you have the budget, and you know the value of that relationship is huge, I always say it's never time to fold them. Because the person that can continue to market and market and market will outperform everybody else. Many, if not all of my mentors use a phrase like, Michael, I'm a 25-year overnight success, or I'm a 10-year overnight success, or through whatever that timeline is. And I can give you case study upon case study of people that gave up, and I can give you the exact opposite case study of people that continued despite not getting a ton of positive replies. They continued, and then things started tipping. That whole compound effect, things start to compound. And maybe it's the 100th time that they see something and that finally clicks. We also have to be realistic. So the only thing to this is that I will typically, as I mentioned earlier in this episode, I typically will cap the gifts somewhere in that $500 range. So if I send a $30 to $50 gift initially, I take it up a notch. I send a $100 gift, maybe one of those custom pens. Maybe I do a $200 gift card to a restaurant. Maybe I try something a few months later. If they aren't at least saying thank you, hitting me up with something, like anything, I'll either remove the gifts and continue the social media, inviting them to the podcast with a different angle, commenting on their social media, doing some email marketing, sending helpful things, and then maybe once a year I'll send a gift. But I'm not going to continue to send $250 or $500 gifts, for example, to people that haven't at least reciprocated or replied to anything. So those people tend to get bumped down, but I still continue the social media. If you say, well, that one person could be worth $500,000, then why would you stop at the very least doing all of the stuff that's free? It's just a matter of your time. So expectation-wise, you'll start to see some positive replies in the first 90 days, but it typically months 6 through 8 is when I start to see the magic happen, when you typically will have landed your first Dream 100 prospect, client, relationship, media outlet, whatever that audience you were going after. And traditionally, within a 12-month period, you'll land 3 to 5 people from your Dream 100 audience. So, Michael, geez, I thought it was going to be like 50. If one relationship can change the trajectory of your life or your business, and I'm saying if you deploy this as I've taught you, you can land 3 to 5, I hope that gives you all the reason to deploy this strategy and to keep listening to this podcast. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. I tried to answer everyone's questions. I lumped them together into the most common themes. Continue to send me questions, comments, thoughts, feedback. I am here for you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night.